Hello there and welcome to Atto Brewing Videos. Today I will be making a rice lager and showing you how I use jasmine rice when brewing beers. I will help you avoid some of the common pitfalls with using rice in beer, and I will make a rice lager from grain to glass. So sit back and enjoy. Hello and welcome to Atto Brewing Videos, where we make small and simple brewing videos. In today's episode, we will be making a rice lager, and this is a style of beer that I'm very excited about because it have a very unique, quite subtle but unique flavor that it's hard to get from anything else. And the main fermentable in beers are usually different kinds of malt based off usually barley. But most macrobreweries, such as for example Budweiser, they substitute this with other kinds of grains such as corn or in Asia rice. Some examples are Sapporo and Asahi, and I apologize in advance for the pronouncements of these beers. Usually these are added instead of barley to keep the costs down, but it also adds a quite unique flavor. And today I will be using jasmine rice, but often people recommend brewers to use very glutinous kinds of rice, such as sushi rice or something with a lot of starch in. That gives yeast a lot of sugars to ferment in the end. And this addition of either corn or rice, in this case, will result in a beer that is much lighter in color and also retaining very little non-fermentable sugars, so they get quite dry often in the final product. So that makes these beers perfect spring and summer beers. Brewing with rice is a little bit different compared to brewing with barley, because barley contains these enzymes that during the mashing will break down the starch inside the barley until fermentable sugars. These are not present within rice, and because the rice here I use today is not prepared in any way, therefore I first rinse it with water to clean it off, heat it up and boil for 30 minutes in order to break them down, and then I add it to the mashing steps just as I would any other grain. And then the extra enzymes from the barley will help to break down the starches, and that works just as I would add any other grain. But I would not be able to add pure rice here. That would not work. You need to substitute it with barley. I haven't tested it myself, but some people report that you need around 50% barley to 50% rice. As you see from the grain bill here today, it's roughly a third rice to 2/3, a little bit more than 2/3 malt. So we're very safe today. Today I will be making a 25-liter batch, and that's 6.6 gallons for your metrically challenged people. I will have imperial units in parentheses throughout the video. And the first malt I add is 3.5 kilos or 7.6 pounds of Pilsner Malt. And the Pilsner Malt is the canvas here for the beer. It's quite neutral, it's relatively pale, and it adds just a little bit of character. And allow the star of the show here, the Jasmine Rice, 1.3 kilos, to really shine through. I've already shown how I prepared it, almost 3 pounds of it. I showed how I prepared it. You could probably use flaked rice in order to not have to boil and rinse it beforehand. I have no experience of that myself, but I've seen some people use it successfully. And then to give the beer a little bit more character, a little bit more head retention, I add Carapils, 0.3 kilograms or 0.7 pounds. And finally, I have a dash of rice hulls that I add in. And the reason for that is to prevent a stuck mash. It's quite common when you use rice, as here in this recipe, that it will clog during mashing, and you will have a nightmare to fix that. So therefore I just add a bit of it here. It shouldn't affect the flavor profile or anything, but it makes my job a lot easier than it would have been otherwise. I did a 60-minute mash at 68 Celsius or 154 Fahrenheit, and followed that up with a 5-minute hold at 78 Celsius or 172 Fahrenheit. Then I removed the grains and added this sparge water. After that, I proceeded to do a 60-minute boil. And in hindsight, I actually would probably have preferred to try to make a 30-minute boil in order to retain more of the grain profile and especially the rice, and really empower it even more. So you could do a 30-minute boil instead, maybe, and then increase the hops correspondingly, so you get a similar bitterness, a similar final product, but with a little bit more grain flavor. I think that could be a good idea for future brews. But I did a 60-minute boil, and at 60-minute remaining, I added 50 grams or 1.8 ounce of Saaz hop to give this earthy classical lager Pilsner flavor as a foundation, and a little bit of bitterness. You could substitute this with something like Magnum to get a even more neutral flavor, not so earthy, more just bitterness. But I prefer the Saaz. I think it gives a nice complexity to a otherwise very simple beer. And then there's not much to do. At 5 minutes, I added Cascade. That was 18 grams or roughly 1.6 ounces for a total bitterness of 2 IBUs. And the reason for this is to add just a little bit of citrus, grapefruit flavor, not enough to overpower the rice in the beer here and the crispness, but just a little bit to make it interesting. And you could also have done this as a whirlpool, but I choose to do the 5-minute edition for just a little hint of bitterness from it. And I do no dry hopping, but you could also dry hop here. But if you would, I would urge you to do it very carefully, because it's very easy to overpower this neutral beer with a very little taste from the malt. If you want to still have that shine through, you cannot over hop this. I think it would be an interesting beer even if you hop it a lot, but my goal today is to still retain a little bit of this rice flavor, so therefore I'm careful with that. And I also added Irish moss for clarity, because this is not a wise beer. We want it crisp and clear with as little yeast as possible. Of course, Protafloc would work very well too. This was just what I had on hand. And I also added a little bit of yeast nutrients. When we make a beer like this, that should be very crisp and clear. We don't want to stress the yeast so it produces off flavor. So therefore we give them nutrients so they are happy and can make the best beer they can. After the boiling, I cooled it down using a countercurrent cooler here for my grandfather. And pitched the 3470 lager yeast, because I will do this very simply. I will not cool anything during fermentation, and this yeast can produce quite nice lagers even at room temperature without too much of flavors. I have successfully brewed this recipe with Quake, with Voss instead, and it helps to add the citrusy, grapefruity flavors that I kind of desire in a beer like this. It's a really good option, but I wanted to try something new, a little bit more just a cleaner beer, so therefore I went with this today. Of course, you could ferment this under pressure, and with a cooling system you can use almost any lager yeast you want. You could also use some kind of session yeast, and even crank up the temperature a bit to create more flavors, but you would kill the rice flavor, overpower it quite easily. And I think that's kind of the theme. You can do a lot of interesting things with this beer, but today I'm just trying to make the rice sing. But you could probably, this is a bit of a blank canvas, so if you really wanted to showcase a special yeast, you could surely do it with a brew like this. After fermenting for 2 weeks, I bottled the beer, and I transferred it to bottles with 10 grams of sugar per liter of beer to get it nice and carbonated. And then I left the bottles in room temperature for 2 weeks and stored them cold for 2 weeks before the first tasting. So when pouring the beer, it was a little bit darker than I anticipated, but it had a very nice head retention and it was really foamy. It faded a little bit over time, but not too much. It's something that's usually a problem with rice beers. They usually have quite bad head retention. That's why I added a little bit extra Carapils in the recipe. And I think in a beer like this, it's a little bit, do you want a really pale beer? Then you can use less Carapils than I did here, but you will probably get a bit less foam. So it's a bit of a balance what you want. I recommend using the palest kind of Carapils you can when brewing a beer like this. But yeah, it's up to you. So let's go for aroma. It's a little bit citrusy on the smell, and a little hint of the earthiness from the Saaz hops. So I think both of them shines through quite clear in the aroma. And when having a taste, it tastes very crisp, very light. And there is a bit of bitterness, just hint of the citrus, but not so much. It's quite neutral, and there is a bit of a malty aftertaste with the sauce earthiness. So it's very nice. Oh, one more thing here is that, as you can see, the beer is not really cleared out here when I'm tasting it. I think that saving it in the bottle for a month or so more in the cold will really make it crystal clear. And if you really want a clear beer, you can ferment malt it with temperature control, and you can cold crash it, and you can use all kinds of additions to get it even clearer. This is just a very simple beer, so for what it is, I think it's very, very nice, but I think it will get even better over time. In the end, I'm very happy with the beer. I think it's a perfect summer beer, a lawnmower beer if you like. It's not super complex, and if you want a little bit more experimental with more citrus and more flavor, more than just the bitterness, then I would recommend going for the Voss route and maybe even a little bit of dry hopping. But if you, like me in this case, just want a simple malt rice beer, then I think this is a very nice recipe to brew. So yeah, have a look at this channel. This is the first of many videos to come. I plan to do a little series where I explain homebrewing for complete beginners and maybe give some tips for both beginners and even you more advanced who haven't watched this video. I will also do a little bit of experimentation with brewing beers with spirulina. So keep an eye for that too. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy this video and keep the world small. Bye!